Walk together, children, don't you get weary. Walk together, children, don't you get weary. Walk together, children, don't you get weary. There's a great camp meeting in the promised land. Walk together, children, don't you get weary. Walk together, children, don't you get weary. Walk together, children, don't you get weary. There's a great camp meeting in the promised land. There's a great camp meeting in the promised land. There's a great camp meeting in the promised land. There's a great camp meeting in the promised land. There's a great camp meeting in the promised land. Walk together, children, don't you get weary. Walk together, children, don't you get weary. Walk together, children, don't you get weary. There's a great camp meeting in the promised land. Walk together, children, don't you get weary. Walk together, children, don't you get weary. Walk together, children, don't you get weary. There's a great camp meeting in the promised land.
Yes, we're gonna walk. We're gonna talk.
We're gonna talk. Yes, we're gonna talk.
We're gonna shout.
We're gonna shout. Yes, we're gonna shout.
We're gonna sing.
We're gonna sing. Yes, we're gonna sing.
We're gonna walk.
We're gonna walk.
We're gonna talk.
We're gonna talk.
We're gonna shout.
We're gonna shout.
We're gonna sing.
We're gonna sing.
We're gonna walk.
Walk,
talk,
talk,
shout,
shout,
sing,
sing, sing, hallelujah, Jesus our King.
We're gonna walk.
We're gonna walk. Yes, we're gonna walk.
We're gonna talk.
We're gonna talk. Yes, we're gonna talk.
We're gonna shout.
We're gonna shout. Yes, we're gonna shout.
We're gonna sing.
We're gonna sing. Yes, we're gonna sing.
We're gonna walk.
We're gonna walk.
We're gonna talk.
We're gonna talk.
We're gonna shout.
We're gonna shout.
We're gonna sing.
We're gonna sing.
We're gonna walk.
Walk,
talk,
talk,
shout,
shout,
sing,
sing, sing, hallelujah, Jesus our King. There's a great camp meeting. A great camp meeting. A great camp meeting in the promised land. There's a great camp meeting in the promised land.
So I want to invite you all, just welcome you all to our first ever President's Leadership Dialogue. It's wonderful to have you all here. And this is a brainchild of the Carolina Leadership Initiative, which was launched by President Pastides in 2010. I'm Kevin Elliott, the director of the initiative and a professor in our philosophy department here at the university.
Well, a hearty welcome to everybody. Good evening. Good evening to you. Good evening to those who reside within the brick walls, the brick boundary, if you will, of the university, but a particular welcome to those of you who reside outside of the boundary of the university, the members of our beloved community. We welcome you tonight, and we're honored by your presence. She was born in due west, South Carolina. I tried to find out what it was due west of. It's just south of Interstate 26 and Interstate 85 near Greenville. Ms. Hunter-Gault's father was an Army chaplain. They moved between Georgia to Indiana, back to Georgia, and uprooted again and again, and at one point wound up in Alaska. She attended segregated schools in every location that she was in, and she was an honor student in high school. She began college at Wayne State University in Detroit, but the call to play a role in the struggle for racial justice back home in Georgia encouraged her, I think maybe demanded her, along with her friend Hamp Holmes, to bring a lawsuit, and they became the first African-American students to enter the University of Georgia in 1961. Many of you know, of course, that our own day of justice and of integration occurred on 9/11 of all dates, September the 11th, 1963, when 3 of our own local heroes were admitted after the legal process had run its course under the aegis of the late, great Judge Matthew Perry. And they are Henri Monteith, today Henri Monteith Treadwell, James Solomon, and the late Robert Anderson. Charlayne Hunter-Gault, of course, went on to accomplish many, many great things. After graduating from the University of Georgia, she persevered there She then became the first African American on the staff of the New Yorker magazine, also joined the staff of the New York Times, PBS's McNeil-Lehrer NewsHour, becoming their national correspondent in 1983. Charlayne moved to South Africa in 1997 to serve as chief correspondent for NPR until 1999, when she became the Johannesburg bureau chief for CNN, a position that she held through 2005. Ms. Hunter-Gault has received 2 Emmys and 4 Peabody Awards. Her new book, To the Mountaintop, is a powerful eyewitness to America's civil rights movement by a person who has her own place in the struggle itself and who went on to achievements in the competitive field of journalism, with periods of time writing for some of the nation's most prestigious magazines, newspapers, and networks. Leadership is what we're celebrating tonight, what we're seeking for tomorrow, and what we must have to build and secure the American dream for those who will follow the true leaders. I'm indeed privileged to extend a warm and enthusiastic South Carolina welcome to Charlayne Hunter-Gault, a role model of leadership in her generation, and we hope for generations to come.
But there's so many distinguished people here tonight who've made this evening possible, including one who would never speak to me again if I had not made this occasion, and that's Professor Pat Sullivan, who's been on me for quite some time to come here, and I'm so thrilled about that. Thank you, Pat. But in South Africa, when there's so many people who are responsible for an event, including the president of the country, you're permitted to say all protocols observed. So you don't have to name every single one of them, who, although they deserve to be named. Excuse me. I'm so pleased to stand before such a wonderful rainbow nation tonight. It's not often that I speak in the North or the South or anywhere else that there's such a rainbow of people. And I always thought the South would come on top in that regard before the rest of the country did. I'm also pleased to stand here and listen, having listened to this amazing Glee Club. It takes me back to the days when I sang in the Glee Club at Henry McNeil Turner High School. And I listened to the soloists, and I could find the sopranos, and I could find the altos. The problem when I sang in the Glee Club was I never could decide whether I was a soprano or an alto. Probably wasn't much of either one, so I stood very close to whichever one happened to be the lead singer that night and mouthed so that people thought I was really doing my part. But I sang along with you guys tonight because I know those songs. You know, I accept engagements like this because I experience renewal in encounters like ours this evening. And I'm grateful to be with you during Black History Month and the month of my birth in this state. The president stole my line. Because when people have asked me where I'm from, and I say South Carolina because I know they won't know due west, they say, no, what town in South Carolina? I said, well, due west. And they do ask me, due west of what? And so that became the title of my first book, In My Place. The first chapter of the book was Due West of What? But I'm so happy to see so many people from due west here tonight, so I don't have to say or have anybody ask me due west of what. I also am thrilled to be here not only because February is Black History Month, but it is also my birth month. And I love birthdays, for each one has not only generated presents from my friends and my family, my husband, who has always taken the heavy hints I leave around in conspicuous places, but part of my celebration of my own New Year has always put me in a reflective mood, with the journalist in me turning the tables on myself and asking me questions, the main tool of my trade. Questions about what it means to add another year to your life, and to look back on the lessons I've learned from the mistakes I've made, the very few mistakes I've made, and from the lessons I've learned that help me to appreciate the blessings that have come my way, not least an occasion like tonight. And one of the blessings came from my sainted grandmother, who venerated age. In fact, my entire family venerated age. And as I carried that blessing to South Africa, I found kindred spirits in that culture. They too respect age. In fact, in South Africa, when you are known as a go-go, that's a very affectionate title that means old lady. Just as my family believed, it's a badge of honor to have accumulated so many years. And in a few days, unfortunately, I won't be here so the Glee Club could sing happy birthday. I'll be 70. And I am so excited about that. Just as my family believed, there's something amazing about growing older and experiencing the lessons of life from those ages. And that's partly why I agreed to come and share experiences tonight. Experiences that I hope may inspire something in some, if not all of you, and especially the younger generation. Now, President Obama dubbed my generation the Moses generation, passing along the mantle to the Joshua generation. And now I think we have the Millennium generation. Isn't that what you all supposed to be? The Millennium generation? That's what they say on Twitter. And even though I'm approaching 70, I tweet. And it is my hope that my life's journey, which is not just about me, but that it will give the lie to what a college professor I had at my alma mater used to say: we learn from history that we do not learn from history. And will also help you to understand that as much as we rightfully honor leaders like Martin Luther King and Nelson Mandela, their success would not have been possible without those who might otherwise be called foot soldiers, but who were also leaders in their own right. Some whose names we'll never know, but whose deeds live on. Some were as young as 16-year-old Brenda Travis. And if you get my book outside tonight, you'll find out who she was. But if you don't, that's okay. Brenda, I'll tell you now, defied her high school principal and joined the adult protesters demanding voting rights for black citizens in Macomb, Mississippi. She was arrested and sent to reform school at 16. But like so many other young people of that era, she was determined to play her part in making sure that the black people of Mississippi got the rights and privileges guaranteed in the Constitution that had long since dismissed the notion that they were only 3/5 of a person. When in 2008, candidate Barack Obama told a crowd in Selma, Alabama, that he stood on the shoulders of giants, he may or may not have known Brenda Travis over in Mississippi, or even any of those who took the blows of the policemen's billy clubs at the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma as they marched for freedom from racist oppression. But he knew, the president-elect knew, but for them, he would not be where he was at the moment or where he is today. When Barack Obama took the oath of office to become the 44th President of the United States, he wrote in a book for veteran civil rights activist John Lewis, "Because of you, John." And while many of you would know John Lewis as a member of the U.S. House of Representatives from nearby Georgia, you may not know that John Lewis took so many beatings to his head from the police nightsticks and billy clubs that when I see him today, I'm amazed that he can even speak a word, or let alone a sentence, and yet he's one of the most eloquent people in the House of Representatives. Great leaders, yes, giants, come in all shapes, colors, ages, socioeconomic status. And they do not assume the mantle of leadership for the sake of getting on CNN or their local radio stations, although sometimes that helps their cause. They assume that mantle to make a difference, and that it's not about them. As what I and countless others did during the civil rights movement, it was not just about us. It was about our own generation, but it was also about our grandmothers, because they too were still enslaved. And it was also about our compatriots, our classmates, but it was also about the generations to come. So today, I'm hoping as I speak to you present and future leaders, that the history of those who answered the call to help America be true to her promise will help the next generation do the same. For even as some of us and some of you, I hope many, if not most of you, have reached mountaintops, there's no question but that the Haitians got it right with their proverb, Deyemang Gemang, beyond the mountain, more mountains. Thanks to my upbringing and experience from my student days, much of my focus in my journey to the mountaintops and the horizons of this world have been issues of justice and equality, and two in particular stand out. One in which I was a participant and observer, and the other as a passionate observer. I was interviewed tonight by one of your local journalists, and I hope the journalism professors in this room won't be upset because they may be teaching this word, but I've always rejected the term objectivity because we're not our computers. We are flesh and blood human beings. We're products of our experiences and our environments. But I do insist, as a journalist, for myself and for others, on fairness and balance. So I can be passionate because I'm human. I can be passionate when I have seen, as I saw in 1985 when I was in South Africa for the first time. I'll come back to that in a minute, but it occurs to me now. When I see a policeman beat an old lady senseless into the ground, my passion is aroused. Why wouldn't it be? She was just standing there. And suddenly there's a policeman who comes up and beats her into the ground. Now, am I, as a journalist, supposed to say, oh, let me just get this down. That looks pretty interesting over there. No. I'm going to be incensed. But what am I going to do? I'm not going to walk up and attack the policeman, but I'm going to write with passion about what he did. And I think I would be totally justified as a journalist, because I would have been fair and balanced. Because I would ask the policeman, why did you do that to that woman? The chances are he wouldn't have an answer, so I'd still get just one side of the story, but still, that's how you do it, you journalism students. Not long ago, I had an exchange with someone who wanted to know why was it important, in his words, to keep digging up the past. And it was a question that might have annoyed me, but for the fact that I could instantly tell him in no uncertain terms that we keep digging up the past in order to share the memories, not least as motivation for a new generation as it charts the future, and to the giants on whose shoulders those who follow will surely stand. Revolution has reverted all the way from here to South Africa, and then a little over 3 decades after our revolution, as I said earlier, I went in 1995. I went when the seeds were being sown for its ultimate victory over racist laws and oppression. In both instances, the foot soldiers of those revolutions, like the foot soldiers of our revolution, were fueled by faith. The same faith we heard Martin Luther King speak about so often, that all human beings would be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of what? You're listening, oh great! But by the content of their character. And we see almost daily, both here in South Africa and in other parts of the world, there are still challenges along those lines to be overcome. But there is no denying the profound impact of those initial victories. Take our own revolution here in the United States as we triumphed over Jim Crow, laws that kept us black folks, or attempted to keep us black folks, in our place. For generations, the black family put a premium on education, even during those days. In fact, while I am happy that tradition of Black History Month continues to be observed in my home and in my school, every day was Black History Day, when we were taught as a matter of course the proud heritage that was ours to appreciate and to extend. No doubt the same is true of other races as well, but ours has a particular history born out of the deprivation of denial, slavery, and segregation, a history that gives us a uniqueness even today in America. But while Black history was the wellspring from which we drank daily, Black parents put priority, the highest priority, on education in general. My father remembers my grandfather telling him, "Get an education, boy, because education is going to be the key to your liberation." And in the case of my grandmother, my father's mother, she had 2 boys, and she embraced his advice for both her children and herself. She went back to school along with her children, and my uncle remembered her sitting with them in the 3rd grade. So I said to my uncle once, "Weren't you embarrassed to have your mother sitting there in the 3rd grade with you?" And my uncle looked so surprised at my question, which made me begin to feel a little silly, because he went on to say, "Why, no," he said. "Embarrassed? No. We were so proud." What I have often said about how I got over, to quote that old spiritual, y'all sing that one too? Is that I was prepared for life by a suit of armor that was crafted by people like my grandparents and the people of our community who functioned as an extended family. The neighbors, if a neighbor up the street caught me misbehaving, she didn't have to call my mother, she just administered the punishment right on the spot. And I didn't dare tell my mother what she had done, because then I would get a second one. But they function that way, the school, the neighbors, the teachers at school and Sunday school. The same system that sought to oppress us was the one that enabled them to equip us with the same value system. A value system that cherished us and nurtured us. They were values that were timeless and transcendent, and helped them and their children to make a way out of no way. in our homes and in our segregated schools and black churches, long before the term empowerment came into the lexicon, which is only a few generations old, if that. We were empowered. We were empowered by those who taught, who were not themselves in a position to legally give us first-class citizenship. But what they did instead, John Siegenthaler, and you know this well, they gave us, instead of first-class citizenship, something that was equally, if not more important. They gave us a first-class sense of ourselves. For example, once a year in our little segregated school in Covington, Georgia, the black teachers and black parents and my uncle's several girlfriends, although they didn't know each other, but they would all get together and have a fundraiser to make up for the inequities in our separate and unequal school. And the winner, the family that raised the most money on that particular night when everybody congregated at the school, their son or daughter would be crowned king or queen of the school. And on this particular night, I watched my mother and grandmother sitting over there unfolding their little linen handkerchiefs, taking out the nickels and the quarters and so forth that they had begged all the neighbors and everybody else for. And at the end of that program, the counting of the money and the singing of great songs and all that, they said, okay, and now we're going to name you, let you know who has won the title of queen or king of the school. I took a very deep breath, and then I heard my name. I was queen of the Washington Street School. And I got a bull of a watch and a diamond tiara. And once they put that tiara on my head, for the next few days, and possibly weeks, I was insufferable to my friends. They got over it, and I got over it. But little did I know, or could ever have imagined, that this process in which those parents and teachers and all my uncle's girlfriends were involved in was one that would prepare me for an historic passage on January 11th. No, actually it was the 9th, 1961. Because as I walked onto the campus of the University of Georgia, there was a huge crowd of white students, and they were shouting, "Nigger, go home." And they continued to shout things like that. And I was amazed, because as I looked around, I was trying to find the nigger, because I was still wearing my tiara. So I wonder, who were they talking about? It couldn't possibly be me. Man, that's a slightly apocryphal story, but that's okay. It is essentially the truth. Because when Hamilton Holmes and I walked onto the campus of the University of Georgia, we walked as if we belonged there. And we did. And I'm so glad to meet so many other fellow dogs. I met one tonight who interviewed me. And she was wearing red and black. She said it was a coincidence, but I don't know. So therefore, the notion that I was a queen had taken up residence in my head, and it remained there even to this day. Sometimes my husband objects to it, but after 40 years of marriage, he's gotten over it, I think. Likewise, my grandfather was the preacher he was a presiding elder in the African Methodist Episcopal Church. And well, he was the preacher, but my grandmother was the saint. And when my mother would send me down there for the summers from Georgia or wherever due west to Florida, she would find me wherever I was, and make me every day learn a Bible verse. And that was one of the things, like the tiara and everything. I didn't know what the significance of it would be years later, but I had to do it because that's what you're supposed to do, obey your parents and grandparents. So like on the third night, I was sitting in my dorm room at the University of Georgia 3 days after we registered, and nothing had died down in terms of the resistance to our presence. And yet, I was confident that it would. So I'm in my room in the dormitory on the first floor, and they're chanting outside the same kinds of things I just said a few moments ago, and I was paying no attention because I'd heard it before. When all of a sudden a brick came sailing through my window and glass splattered all over my clothes. Well, I might have been black, I might have been raised in segregation and all of that, but I loved my clothes. I had some really nice clothes. And that's what I was thinking about. Ooh, glass all over my clothes. But then the police came very late, long after the rioters had had time to do their thing, and started throwing tear gas. And the gas was coming in and this and that and that and that, and you could still hear the noises outside. And then the dean came to tell me that unfortunately Hamilton Holmes and I were going to be suspended that night for our own safety. But because the police had arrived late, they were all white, all of these people who were telling me I was being suspended for my own safety were all white, I could have been afraid, but for my grandmother's voice in my ear. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. So as we walked to the car, somebody from one of the news agencies snapped a picture, and they saw the Madonna up to my mouth and tear down my face, and assumed that that was out of fear. It wasn't. I was so angry that I didn't know how to react to this dean who was saying I was being suspended. And I was frustrated with myself, and that's why the tears were coming down. But I wasn't afraid because I was walking through the valley of the shadow of death, and I feared no evil. And that sort of thing has been with me all my life. The other thing that I was frustrated about was I couldn't say anything. I couldn't say you lie. I couldn't say you're being dishonest, because when Autherine Lucy attempted to integrate the University of Alabama, and they expelled her with the same 4 words, for your own safety. Is that 4 words? Right. She fought back verbally, which gave the university an excuse, albeit a flimsy one, but it gave them an excuse to say, well, if that's how you feel, you don't need to be here. So we learned from that. I was standing on the shoulders of the giant by the name of Autherine Lucy, so angry that I could only have tears coming out of my eyes, but I was not afraid. Thus, when I graduated from the University of Georgia and entered the professional world, though I had to learn a lot about my profession as well as about racism and sexism in the professional world, even up north, I walked in wearing my crown and my suit of armor, and I entered the fray with confidence that I would be at least as good as anyone in my field. I was a little anxious when I submitted my first story to the New Yorker, because I, like the girls from Bryn Mawr and the boys from Harvard and others who had had different kinds of educations, we were all doing the same thing, typing rejection slips and so forth on real typewriters. You probably haven't even seen one, have you? But everybody at lunchtime would be doing the things that they really wanted to do, like writing poems. I was writing short stories and this and that, and I submitted one. And then I got a call from the editor. And as I heard him speak, he was a wonderful, very soft-spoken but brilliant editor by the name of William Shawn. And he said, "Miss Hunter," as he called everybody. And I thought he was going to say, "It was so nice of you to make this effort, and I want you to keep on trying." That's what I quickly imagined. But instead he said, "Miss Hunter, we like your piece called 115th Between Lenox and 5th, and we'd like to run it in the magazine, if it's all right with you." And before I realized it, I said, "Well, Mr. Shawn, you can have it. I mean, you can run it out. You don't even have to pay me." And all of my colleagues in the room were looking, going. So very shortly after that, I was promoted to the writing staff as its first black writer. And I think that the kinds of experiences that I had had in Georgia sort of set my course for the kinds of things I wanted to write about. It could be different people, different circumstances, but again, it was about freedom and justice and equality. So that I had an instinct then to write about Harlem and black people in a different way than the majority white media were writing about them. And that was just one of the many byproducts of those values passed on to me at an early age. I spent the next 50-something years of my professional life comforted by all of that and gifts of the time-worn values and suit of armor they crafted. And even as my journalistic efforts took on topics that reached beyond my neighborhood and my people, I always sought them out. And those were those people that I found were people who had always been stereotyped or caricatured or not paid any attention to at all. So the challenge I had was to write about people, black people in particular, in ways that were recognizable to themselves, from Watts to the West Bank, Berlin, Baghdad, and of course, my native South and South Africa. Like the legions of Americans who were drawn to the South African struggle against apartheid, I too was captured by this, the last country in sub-Saharan Africa to take its place among the family of free nations. It had been almost 30 years since Kwame Nkrumah hailed Ghana as the turning point of the continent. And it had taken a massive effort on the part of South Africans at home and in exile and peoples all over the world. And when I first traveled to South Africa in 1985, as I alluded to earlier, those efforts on the part of so many people, including the Americans involved in the anti-apartheid movement, had still not borne fruit. South Africa was a country in turmoil, in the throes of relentless violence similar to the kind that we had seen in Alabama and Mississippi, and yes, even Georgia. Children fighting and dying to have but a simple wish, to be treated as human beings, the equal of other human beings. And for that, they were being subjected to some of the worst violence. I often travel to those places today where there was so much turmoil and terror, and I am so surprised. In fact, the government has done an amazing job. In townships, they've built new government houses that have electricity and running water. Other houses are being built or expanded by an emerging new middle class, some of whom choose to remain in the only place they've ever known as home, and which they see a little differently from the tourists on the bus. Otherwise, many have earned enough money now to live in some of the upscale neighborhoods or wherever they choose, in same areas as whites at all socioeconomic levels. But South Africa is undergoing one of the world's most profound social experiments, attempting to create a society that remains stable while instituting radical changes aimed at redressing the woeful inadequacies of the past. It's already passed one test thanks to Nelson Mandela and his foot soldiers and co-leaders, as his black government took power from the whites who had governed on the basis of white supremacy. But today, we have a different situation. In South Africa, where Nelson Mandela's insistence on forgiveness helped the country avoid a bloodbath as it transitioned from the white minority government to a multiracial democracy, the racial respite gave the government space to pursue policies designed to empower the historically disempowered, not unlike affirmative action in this country. But for all that, as here, there continues to be massive unemployment, especially among the youth, substandard housing, skills shortages, and shortages of money for tuition, and schools opening without books for the students. 18 years into its new democracy, South Africa reminds me a little bit of America in 1968, when a presidential commission reached the conclusion that took most Americans by surprise, to wit, America was in fact two societies, one white, rich and prospering, one black, largely poor and in decline. The explosion that this condition led to in America in the late 60s has yet to happen in South Africa, although there are many explosions on a regular basis over basic service delivery. But there are worries that the legions of unemployed youth with little education and virtually no skills amount to a ticking time bomb. And so far, no one has yet to come up with a plan for them. Although I despair, there are similar existences right here in America. I live in hope for South Africa's future, as well as for America's, where President Obama has recognized what China and India are already putting into practice. Investment in education is the key to future economic viability and sustainability. 20-some years ago, on September 5th, 1985, one of our reporting team on a series that ultimately ended up on the NewsHour called Apartheid's People was a young South African by the name of George Death, D-E''ATH. But as cynical as we journalists can be sometimes, we called him Dr. Death, because if you took out the apostrophe, that's what it spelled. He'd been an enormous help to me in decoding some of the details of apartheid. And on those nights when we were unwinding after tension-filled days and ducking and dodging apartheid agents, because even though the people who were protesting apartheid were enemies of the state, we journalists were also considered the enemy. George would agonize in those moments of relaxation about his future and that of his country. He loved his country, but he hated apartheid. And as we were leaving after a month's research and filming, he gave me a book. It was called The Africans by David Lamb. You must know it over there in the history department. Don't you? George wrote a little note before the preface, calling my attention to the last 3 lines of the introduction, saying that he hoped they would become the first lines for a better future for Africans. And the lines were these: "But troubled are these early years of nationhood have been. Africa need not dwell forever in the uncertain twilight zone. Its dreams have only been mislaid, not lost." Not long after that, George visited me in New York and marveled that we, a black woman and a white man, could walk down Broadway and nobody even turn around and look at us. A year later, back in still tumultuous South Africa, George was attacked with machetes when caught in the crossfire between rival black political groups, one of which was being egged on by the state security forces. And within a few hours, Dr. Death was indeed dead. Today, I walk around the community in Johannesburg, where we stayed in those days and where we too were followed by the state security people keeping an eye on us. And I'm amazed to see the black and white couples strolling around with impunity as George and I did down Broadway, often with their cappuccinos and their cappuccino-colored babies, and the entrepreneurs who are displaying their wares and selling them for increasingly high prices. My husband says I have an investment in that community now. But prices that the group of upwardly mobile blacks, they call black diamonds, can afford. But I often think of George, and I wonder what he would think about his country's dreams today. Certainly no longer lost, but not completely fulfilled. George and I would probably debate the reality versus the promise, not least about a society that knows more of what used to be kept secret. There are many things that we could debate in South Africa today, like the attempt right now of the government to reintroduce some of the secrecy that was in existence during the apartheid era, and we are all fighting back against that. I, from sort of quietly encouraging the South Africans to do it. But if I had to, and I have actually I did speak out about it. I wrote about it for the New Yorker. It appeared a few weeks ago, so I haven't been that quiet on the subject and don't intend to be. But knowing Dr. Death, our debate would be over a bottle of the robust wine he loved so well. And in those days, when George was alive, I used to defer to him, but I wouldn't defer to him anymore on wine because I make it myself in South Africa. But I also know enough now about what I don't know, but also where to find the best ammunition for my interests. So I would go to my arsenal that I've assembled over the past 15 years and remove one of the books containing the strong emerging voices of the new South Africa to help me tell my tale. Voices like Beverly Jansen's, a former municipal councilor, mayor, and school teacher in the Western Cape. This is what she has written. Let us place lighted candles in sparkling crystal jars and clay calabashes to celebrate the beginning of a new dawn in our existence. Let us send a celestial light from our majestic mountains and blood-spattered sands where spears once pierced freedom-craving hearts to envelop the horror of yesterday. Let us write words of hope for those whose dreams before were stillborn. Paint pictures of love for those shackled by sorrow of dark nights gone. Dance duets with outstretched arms in flowing white robes, and sing praises in virginal voices while celebrating the beginning of a new dawn of existence. And I consider myself privileged, if not blessed, to have witnessed new dawns of existence as I have traveled to mountaintops and words, in the words of Robert Frost, roads not taken. From Jim Crow to freedom in my native South, to apartheid South Africa and freedom in that land. And from there, I have chronicled the often perilous path of the countries in the rest of the continent. Some are still stuck in the misery bred of corruption, but many more are taking baby steps to democracy, celebrating the beginning of a new dawn in their existence, all of which has happened because good people assume the mantle of leadership. Good people beyond the Mandelas and the names that you know. Good people whose names may never be known, but who are the giants on whom the South Africans of today stand. Last year, as I approached the 50th anniversary of my entry into the University of Georgia, I was prompted to look back over this past half century and reflect on what it yielded. as I write in my latest book, To the Mountaintop. The year 1961 was one of the busiest and bloodiest years of the young civil rights movement. It was a year that tested the nonviolent commitment of young activists, even as doors long shut were forced open and young people like myself walked through them. It was the year Barack Obama was born. Young Obama was fortunate enough to have had a mother who crafted for her son a suit of armor out of the values of his heritage, my heritage, our heritage. She overcame young Barack's adolescent resistance. If you've read his book, you'll know how resistant he was, and taught him that rational, thoughtful people could shape their own destiny. So I credit his mother with where he is today, but you know, I'm a mother, so there we go. Moreover, this white woman taught him about the marches for freedom in the United States, telling him to be black was to be the beneficiary of a great inheritance, a special destiny, glorious burdens that only we were strong enough to bear. Among the many things I took from that story was that such values are embraceable. They are human values and belong to us all, from the Moses generation to the Joshua generation to the millennials and beyond. Goodness is not the sole preserve of any race or place in the world, and none of our victories belong to us alone. Freedom, justice, human dignity, and universal values that are important at home and abroad, and what I have learned on my journey to the mountaintop over this past half century, our connection to and reliance on our neighbors who speak different languages and wear different kinds of clothing is greater than ever. The crisis in Nigeria just today, as the crisis expands, we here in America, if it isn't resolved soon, will soon feel it in the prices of our fuel bills, which will be going up, because that's our number 3, they give us their oil. What I have taken away from this glorious journey is that we have got to learn to embrace the world outside of due west and Columbia and Columbus and New York and Washington, D.C., if we are going to have the kind of society that causes the world to want to embrace us. Throughout my lifetime, and I'm almost finished, so those who want to leave can leave, but I just got a few more things to say. Throughout my lifetime, that has been the narrative that has defined America. I would hope that the discouraging words we hear today in the political arena, not least the not so subtle racism and the slurs about immigrants, doesn't turn that narrative into a nightmarish tale told by idiots. Today, I would hope that those who would drape themselves in the mantle of leadership take on the task of educating and informing Americans of what it really means to be a citizen of this country, and remind those who are bashing immigrants how America earned the description of itself as a nation of immigrants. And those who take it on might do well to remember the words emblazoned on the Statue of Liberty, words that held out a bridge to the world, and still does. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. Send these, the homeless tempest-tossed, to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. And as I remember those words and grew up believing in them, I also remember that when I was a little girl, sitting at my grandmother's knee, reading the comic strips while she read the news and the sports pages, her passion, I developed my passion for the adventures of the comic strip character, Brenda Starr. You can Google her, because I know you have no idea who I'm talking about. And even when my mother couldn't have known that such a dream was possible for a young black girl growing up in the South of Jim Crow, laws that sought to keep her in her place as they defined it, she never told me not to dream. For instinctively, my mother knew that dreams propel ambition. And while she's no longer with us, she's with me every day as I travel roads not taken and climb mountains in the distance. I find myself not only thinking that Brenda Starr never had it so good, but there are more mothers like mine and mentors like those you have here tonight to inspire each generation to be all that they can be to themselves and to what MLK called all God's children. And I want to close tonight because we have such amazing voices. I want a few of you just to come up here with me for a minute. You can all come, or you can none come, and you can one come. But come quickly because everybody wants to go eat, including myself. Haven't eaten. I don't even know what day it is. All right, are we coming? Are we coming fast? Like we're trying to get to class? Like we're trying not to be late for class? Are we all up here? Where's our leader? Where is he? Is he coming too? Huh? Where is he? Oh, he's there. I don't see him. Oh, there he is. You didn't know about this, did you, Kat? I didn't either. I just got inspired by them. You ready for this?
I think.
I know, I heard you. Now I'm going to start. Now remember I told you, every time I started when I sang in the choir, I sang it in a different key. So you have to just figure out what key I'm in. Because when these ones join in, these ones are going to join in too. They've been tired of sitting down, and when we sing this song, they're going to stand up and clap. Harder than they clap when you were singing Wade in the Water, okay? Now, I know you know this song. Let's go. Try to keep up with me, okay? Ain't gonna let no